I used to do some leadership training when I was kind of growing up through the corporate world, Dennis, and I'm sure I know in your world you had to have done quite a bit.
Oh yeah. Yeah, and I think, you know, you hit it right. You called it training or whatever. In
Hmm.
today's world, I think it's more about development, and I think there's a
Hmm.
huge difference between training and development. Even though they
Yep.
end up with the same results, it's a different approach. Um, and I think our our guest today is going to talk about what that all means and how that plays out and how is that different in the old day versus the new way that people are going through leadership development. Because no one is most people are not born to be leaders. It's you learn from on the job experiences and those kinds of things. And sitting in a classroom and trying to absorb it all in it was training. It was not development.
Yeah. In full disclosure, when Dennis said, "Hey, we're going to have a leadership consultant come on," I was like, "Okay, that's definitely a good topic, but I don't know how much interest I'll have in this one." I tell you, Dennis, I was really interested in this one. This was interesting for me. So today's guest, Robert Avinger with Avinger Consulting, is going to talk to us a little bit about how leadership development has changed and what we're doing different today. I think his approach was really refreshing, and I really enjoyed this conversation. So let's take a listen to this particular one.
WFH with two guys. Now here's Benny and Dennis.
It's been a while for me, Dennis, but I used to work for some pretty big companies. And as I was kind of being trained in management programs and development, the companies would inevitably, they would bring in some leadership training. We'd have these seminars. It would be for all day. And I was supposed to take these four acronistic words and be able to come up with a leadership style and learn how people think and blah, 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 and all this kind of stuff. And that was supposed to give me the certification and I was going to be an amazing leader. Um, I have to
Did
admit
it
that
work? Did it work?
look at me, I'm amazing, right? Well, the truth of it is that I think that there are little bits and pieces that I do remember that have kind of stuck with me through the years. But the truth be told, I probably didn't take away that full 6, 7 hour day of training,
Yeah.
or maybe even a day and a half, and
Well,
really.
I remember somewhere I mean, I worked for 7-Eleven. They sent us off to Bethlehem, Pennsylvania for 2 weeks for, intense training, and it was great. And then you come back with all these manuals and stuff, and there was nobody there to help you or guide you. And supposedly in 2 weeks, you were supposed to absorb it all.
Yeah, and I think that what I've learned is that, it's that was really helpful at the moment, but I think it kind of fades after a while. But leadership is more than that. And I think, having an expert to tell us a little bit about what training and leadership development really is all about. Robert, help us with this stuff here. Yeah. It, First of all, thanks for coming on the show. We appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks, Robert.
Absolutely. I'm glad to be here. I appreciate the invitation.
Yeah, as we typically small and medium-sized business owners, there are a lot of things that we take a look at, not only for the leaders in our company that we have, but for ourselves too as well. And we really want to get the best out of not only ourselves but our employees, and that really should be, to do the development. It's more than just here's maybe I'm dating myself when I say it's a binder, right, with all this information, and here, go ahead and incorporate it. But really, it's come a long way, hasn't it?
It really has. And you've said a couple of things that have kind of uh, piqued my interest a little bit. One is the whole notion of training and what is training and how is training really distinct from development. And I would argue that, training is really an appropriate kind of construct, if you will, or context for learning a new hard skill. Take, for example, something like learning how to play the guitar. There is, training around learning how to play the guitar or learning to cook or something I'm doing right now. I'm kind of a very novice beginning woodworker. And that requires kind of training on how to use a saw, how to use it safely, what are the different cuts you make, etc. And for me, when we get into the realm of personal growth and development, which I would say is leadership development, it takes it out of the realm of training and is something very different and requires kind of a different approach. And, this is something that I've certainly learned over my career of being in the people development space. And it's really helped me evolve what I do and how I help organizations.
Mhm.
And right, so that's one thing, the word training. And then you mentioned binders, and we can all relate to that. We've got binders. I've actually probably got some right back here on this shelf behind me that have been sitting up there for years.
Years.
Mm.
And I haven't opened them up in years. And so, that's a kind of an old relic, if you will, of the old training days and that training approach to personal growth and development that I think
Mm.
um, is probably no longer useful, or it's, as I mentioned, a bit outdated. So
Mm.
anyway, just a couple of initial reactions to things you were
Yeah.
saying.
No, and I think, Robert, it has changed. I mean, I'm assuming AI plays a part into it, just the approach, having the fact of Zoom, because back in the day when I was at 7-Eleven, that was back in the 80s. So you didn't have Zoom. I mean, you either had a phone call or you had to fly and meet people. And so the easiest thing for the company would be to fly people into a spot and regurgitate and ram as much information as you can into their head for a week or two, and then hope that they regain some of it and off send them back to the field to go fight the battle.
Yeah, yeah. I the key thing that I've learned over my career is personal growth and development doesn't happen in a workshop. It doesn't happen in a classroom. It doesn't happen even in a virtual session, whether it's on Teams or Zoom or whatever virtual
Mhm.
platform you may be using. Um, Personal growth and development, and in this context, leadership development happens on the job, happens
Right.
through the experiences that you're having day in and day out. With that approach of going in, how can I learn from this? How can I take this experience and use it for my growth and development? And that means being really intentional. And on the front end, giving people kind of the tools and the resources they need in order to be able to do that. And that's really, as I think about leadership development, those are kind of key constructs or key concepts that I'm building into the programs that I'm now running for my clients.
Well, let's talk about that, Robert. I kind of gave a little bit of an example as did Dennis in terms of, for me, a couple days, he had a training session, sounds pretty intensive for a couple weeks. Um, and really we were supposed to go to those and attend those seminars and leadership training and be able to come out, in such a better space. But what you had kind of shared with us earlier off mic was that that's really not the best way to do it. And your approach to leadership development is a lot has changed, and I guess it's really kind of morphed into something a little bit more. I was really fascinated when you were kind of talking a little bit of that. I want to dive into that, but tell us about how the approach is today.
Sure. So, Dennis will remember with us having worked together. Dennis, I think you were probably a participant in some of the leadership development work
I'm sure I
that
was.
I did. And you were a great student, Dennis.
And you were a great teacher, so it was great.
Um, Back in the day, we would do a leadership development program, would be a kind of a 3-day in-person classroom style event. And then after that event, it would be like, good luck. Let us know if you need anything.
Mhm.
And invariably, as human beings tend to do, we go back into our everyday world and we naturally fall back into the old patterns of the way we've always done things.
Hmm.
And so I've begun to, in learning from that and hearing the feedback over the years from those programs, began to really think about leadership development as more of a longitudinal, longer term experience. So I'm designing programs now that are anywhere from 6 to 8 months to 10 months long.
Oh.
that are a blend of in-person experiences and virtual experiences and coaching along the way. Um, and these programs I find are really helpful and are essential to them is it is a much more what I would call bespoke approach. In other words,
Mm,
custom to the organization that I'm working with. What is their culture? What are their values? What are the expectations that they have of the leaders in that organization? That's a piece of the customization piece. And then the other is where's the individual? And what does that kind of individual need in terms of their own development? What's the context in which they're leading? Are they leading a large team of 7, 8, 10 direct reports? Do they have a small team? Are they new at this leadership thing? Have they been around the block for a while in terms of leading teams? All of those go into creating programs that are really flexible in nature to meet the organizational needs and the needs of the individual. So again, it's a blend of that individual, excuse me, that in-person approach, virtual, and then coaching along the way. So that's just a high level overview of how I frame and how I structure leadership development experiences for my clients.
Well, and Robert, I would assume, because I mean, to your point, I'd be in those classes for 3 days. I'd leave there, you'd be all excited, you'd go try to do stuff, and then you go in the real world, and some things would happen that it wasn't covered in the book, and it's like, oh, what do you do? And you would, to your point, you would just resort back to your old behaviors. I'm assuming in this model, I could sit down with you at the next meeting and talk about, hey, here's some things that we talked about. This worked really well. Here's some things that you didn't tell me about, or I didn't think about, or I didn't listen very well. Or how could I handle this situation differently in the future to get a better outcome? That you truly become, you're like a football coach. You run the plays, you practice them a lot, you go out and run it, and something goes well, you're celebrating with them. But if something doesn't go well, you talk about, okay, how can you adjust or make things better in the next play?
That's right. That's that kind of real time coaching, Dennis. That's a part of the overall design, which is that opportunity either in a group setting, so the whole cohort of leaders comes together in a virtual session, or being available to do some one off, if needed, coaching. But that is, anytime we do a virtual session in these programs, the first 30 minutes of that session is a discussion around, hey, it's been a month since we've been together. What's worked really well? Where have you seen some successes of kind of new leadership? And let's celebrate those successes and reinforce why that works, et cetera. And at the same time, what are some challenges that you've faced? Where have you maybe tried a new way of leading and it just blew up in your face? It backfired on you and wonder why. And let's talk about why. And let's talk about maybe how we address it going forward. So it is that real time coaching that I think can be really impactful and is necessary to
Right.
really drive that leadership development and taking something that's a new habit or a new kind of skill, technique, approach, and developing it into something that's more of a habit.
Yeah, I mean, as a leader, I mean, I love college football, and so I mean, we're just finishing all the bowls and the championships and stuff. And I mean, you look at coaches. I mean, they're leaders. I mean, if you think about it, you look. There's some that are very successful, and there's some that have get fired after 3 years and make a lot of money and leave. And I think they're in the racket to get fired because they actually probably make more money getting fired than they do if they stay. Um, but I mean, I think, those are places you can learn as a leader to think about. And you look at that. I mean, you've got, as a football coach, you've got there's all kinds of different things hitting you. And it's like the different players that you forget the cultures, or they come in and you've got all 5-star players, but the team craps out. Well, it craps out because the leadership didn't find the best way to get them to click and get all on the same bus to head to get that ball down the field right. And I think apply that in our real world, it applies the same way.
It's interesting you're bringing up the sports analogy, and it's one that I often use as well. And the irony of it. So when you look at professional athletes, and I would put college football players
Yeah.
in the professional
Yeah. They were
athlete,
they're there today. Yeah.
um, but the amount of time that professional athletes spend on their craft when nothing is at stake. In other words, at practice, right? There's the, amazing kind of legendary stories of people like Michael Jordan and Tiger Woods and Scotty Scheffler and Steph Curry, et cetera, who spend hours and hours in the gym or on the golf range, where every shot they take, every golf stroke, swing of the golf club, nothing's at stake. It doesn't matter if they duck hook it. It doesn't matter if they swish it, right, et cetera. Um, as leaders, we never practice. We are always on the court, right? We are practicing our craft
Mm, mm,
when things are at stake.
yeah.
And so creating an environment where people have the opportunity to really practice when the stakes are low, right? So they can really begin to hone this art of leadership in a way that is where the risk is minimized. And it's just a great analogy that I've used, and it really hits home for people, especially as we in the programs where we're doing a lot of role playing, a lot of scenario planning, a lot of scenarios, et cetera, that the value of that comes back in this notion of practice. So
Yeah,
anyway, you
because
brought up,
nobody goes into business to be a leader. I mean, it's kind of a natural thing that happens, but a lot of times you get hired to be a very tactical person, and then you work your way up and you're a leader. But to your point, you've never really practiced being a leader. You're really good at accounting, you're good at IT, and all of a sudden you become the leader of that department. And that's why I think a lot of them fail, because they don't have that experience to practice. They've been blessed because they're really good at they're talented, but they may not have leadership, or they need some refinement, just a little bit, that would make their life a lot easier. And definitely the recipients
yeah,
would be more willing to follow and be supportive, because you've got a leader, but you also have to have followers. And if people don't follow, you're not much of a leader, I guess.
that's right, that's right. I'll take that analogy of practicing one step further. When we are thinking about developing our leadership, or when I think about developing others as leaders, and this 6, 8, 10 month long experience, getting those leaders, getting the participants in the programs to really orient their mind around a particular body of work, whether that's a specific project that they've been assigned as a leader to go drive that project, or it could be developing their team, et cetera. But using that as kind of the test case, if you will, or the
Mhm.
laboratory for practicing these new ways of leading that they're learning in the workshop format. So that's another kind of key ingredient that I've weaved into the design of the leadership development programs, and what I've learned over time is really important.
Yep. I mean, having experience is valuable. I mean, you can't put a price on some of those
Yeah.
things. And I mean, that's where time is a friend, but it's also, if you're young and starting out, you don't have that. And so those are the challenges.
Right.
Yeah. So, Robert, I would imagine in your role in how this has kind of changed over the years, that your role has really become one of, when I say mentor, coach, therapist in some capacity, whereas you really had a focus of being an instructor or a teacher in kind of like the old ways. Today's environment, you really have to, if this is a 6 to 8 month process, I'm going to be taking the information that I have, that I've learned from you, and coming back to you and say, "Hey, Robert, I really, I ran into this brick wall, and I was remembering the things you were talking about, but when I tried doing it, I failed, or it just didn't go the way I was expecting it." That's kind of a different role, isn't it?
Yeah, I get a lot of that. And equally, Benny, I get the folks that come in and say, um, they're astounded at doing something, taking a different approach to something, and it worked really well, right? They had a
Mm,
positive outcome, and they're like, "Oh, it starts to click," and we can use that to reinforce. But yeah, to your point, I do spend quite a bit of time talking with individuals about how to address the challenges that they're coming up with. And, back to one of my original points, every single challenge is distinct and unique because it involves human beings. And as human
Mm, yeah.
beings, we're all unique and distinct.
Yes.
So it really does require looking at each one a little bit differently and a little bit kind of uniquely, if you will. So, yeah,
Yeah, because I assume
a
as
lot
a
of fun.
leader, I mean,
Every time
the
doing it.
the pressures could be coming from the people that are following you, but it also could be coming from your boss and higher ups that they create challenges that force you to behave in a different manner than how you really want. So it's like, okay, how do you handle all those different pressures that come through
That's
and
right.
develop yourself so that you're more effective? No, that's
And
great.
and a lot of the pressures are self-induced too, right? They're the
Yes.
pressures that
Yeah.
I'm putting on myself. So,
Yep.
yeah.
And since we've kind of had this evolving of, the training that you've been able to do, what's your personal observation in terms of, the way that's being done today versus yesterday? What are you personally seeing in terms of the way it's sticking, the way that people are really incorporating it into their business practices? What are you kind of getting back from the people who've brought you in and what they've been able to experience?
So I would say maybe two things in reaction to that question. One is one of the things that I think people are beginning to realize or coming to the realization of is that developing ourselves as leaders is a journey. It's a lifelong journey in many ways. So,
Mm.
in other words, going to the 2 week intensive in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, while great, that's not going to cut it in terms
Mm.
of getting to where we want our leaders to be, getting to where I want to be as a leader, et cetera. So that's one piece. The other piece is um, core to, and this is a belief model that I have, core to leadership effectiveness is quality of the relationships that we have. So, in other words, um, in many ways, old school thinking of leadership is how do I get someone to do what I need them to do? Right?
Mm.
How do I get them to produce a result? And
Mhm.
there are certain techniques of doing that. And for me, the number one influence on influencing others is the quality of the relationship that I have with them. And do they feel safe with me? Do they feel like I trust them? Do we have that degree of transparency and trust and kind of that sense of caring for one another that allows us to move forward in a powerful way together. So, um, leadership happens over time. Leadership development happens over time, and in many ways, a lifetime. And the realization that it really is the quality of the relationships of the people that I work with that has everything to do with my effectiveness as a leader. And if we can get leaders focused on strengthening relationships versus just producing a result, the results will come, right? And that's important. I'm not minimizing that, but it is the relationships that are a key driver for that. So those
Benny,
are
if you
maybe
Benny,
two
if you
reactions.
think back in season 3, we had Ed Hinkle on, and we talked about the dream manager. And I mean,
Mm.
that kind of follows along with what Robert's talking about. And that he came at it from a standpoint of helping people reduce turnover, but it was all around that manager listening and understanding what was the challenge that those people faced, because it's not just in that 8-hour day, but if there's 16 other hours in the day that they have other challenges that they're dealing with.
Yeah.
And that if you develop that relationship with your team, you have a different approach than just being the task leader and holding them accountable for 8 hours.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's a fascinating topic. And for me, and just listening to how Robert's approach to the training and really, developing your leaders. I've been sitting back listening and thinking from my past experiences and the leaders that I've trained and the people that I've worked with and in my own personal development. I could see a lot of value in terms of your approach. And I think that's something to be really take a look at for some
Yeah, I
folks
mean,
out
I
there.
I look back at everything I've been through to develop into where I'm at today.
Mm.
Your approach would have been so much more productive and beneficial and rewarding, not only for myself, but for my team
Yep.
and the other people around me, because I think I would have developed a lot more robustly and quicker than probably the old way.
And it's important to remember we're never done, right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
Right.
absolutely.
It's always that developmental journey is always going to be there. So
Always.
that's awesome.
Robert, I think that this is such a fascinating topic and really one I hadn't thought that much about. I'll have to admit, in terms of like kind of your approach to it is really refreshing, and I enjoy that. And I'm going to guess that there are going to be some other leaders out there who feel the same way, but they would like to understand a little bit more. If someone is listening out there and they want to get a hold of you, what's the best way for them to reach out to you?
yeah, there's I guess a couple of ways. I've got on LinkedIn, so you can uh, connect with me on LinkedIn, and I'll get a message directly from there. Or you can visit my website, which is avingerconsulting.com. And there you'll see a little bit more about my approach and different services that I work with clients around, et cetera. But yeah, those are two places. And then my direct email is just robert@avingerconsulting.com. So yeah, that's the easiest way.
Make sure to reach out to Robert. Robert Avinger, Avinger Consulting, thank you so much for stopping by today. We're going to have you back. I think there's some other things that we have to ask you, and we need your expertise. So thanks for stopping by today, Robert.
Well, I look forward to the next conversation. That'll be fun.
Thanks again.
All right.
All right.
Thanks again. Thanks, Robert.
Thanks, Dennis.
You've been listening to WFH with Two Guys. We'll see you next time.